The Galactic Concordat of Species, often humorously referred to by sentients as the GCS, had finally arrived at a unanimous conclusion after 3 full cycles of deliberation. If you're keeping track, that's about the same amount of time it takes a Kronchian slug to develop functional iced STS. The decision? Humans were officially too terrifying to be allowed military forces in the vast expanse of interstellar space. You should have seen the look on Ambassador Vic's face as he proudly clicked his mandibles during the session. The Orenhide's representative practically hummed with self-satisfaction, his carapace shining under the chamber's lights as he read aloud Resolution 42J7, the ban on all human military personnel, equipment, and operations in Concordat-controlled space, effective immediately. The evidence is irrefutable, droned High Chancellor Falb, a gelatinous mass of tentacles and inflated self-importance from the Ulon Federation. Humans approach conflict with a disturbing eagerness that threatens the stability of our enlightened galactic community. What the Chancellor really meant was that humans had recently assisted the Mingxian in securing their independence after the Ulon had been harvesting their young for so-called therapeutic nutrient baths. It's funny how context tends to vanish in diplomatic translations. The chamber's holographic display showed footage the various ambassadors deemed incriminating. Humans charging headlong into plasma fired to rescue non-human allies, a human sergeant holding a strategic position against seemingly impossible odds, and a human fleet captain pulling off an impossible maneuver, now known in galactic naval circles as the Batista Gambit, named after the allegedly insane captain who first executed it. Their unpredictability makes them incompatible with our notion of civilized warfare, remarked Admiral Zorks of the Prolan Defense Force, a species that believed in at least 15 years of planning before firing a single shot in a conflict. Meanwhile, human ambassador Dr. Elena Webb sat composed, occasionally tapping into her datapad with a subtle smile that made some ambassadors uneasy. When the final vote came in, unanimous, except for the 3 species under human protection, Dr. Webb simply nodded and requested the floor. The Terran Confederation accepts the Concordat's decision, she stated, her tone calm but almost too serene. We will begin the immediate withdrawal of all military personnel and equipment as defined in Resolution 42J7. Ambassador Vic nearly choked on his ceremonial fermentation fluid. They had expected tantrums, threats, or maybe even a dramatic walkout. The humans' calm acceptance was, in a way, even more chilling. Just like that? Squeaked First Minister Cub, whose species had suffered most from their short-lived border conflict with human forces. Like that, Dr. Webb confirmed, her smile unwavering. We respect the democratic process of the Concordat, even if we disagree with the outcome. As the session ended, Ambassador Vic scuttled over to his Prolan counterpart. Well, that's the human problem solved, he chittered with confidence. Without their military, they'll have no choice but to negotiate fairly and respect our superior diplomatic traditions. Admiral Zorks furrowed his brow. Did the human representative seem amused to you? He asked. Merely putting on a brave face, Vic dismissed. What can they do now? Send diplomats to fight their battles? Across the room, Dr. Webb finished her final notes, closed her datapad with a satisfying snap, and whispered something into her communicator. Her aide, upon hearing it, broke into a wide grin. Neither the ambassador nor the admiral noticed the small clause at the bottom of Resolution 42J7, subsection 12, paragraph 9, which specifically defined military personnel according to the Concordat's occupational classification system, a system that humans had helpfully assisted in creating 3 cycles ago. Back on Earth, in a secure underground bunker, officially designated as Conference Room B, but actually the Crisis Management Center for the Terran Confederation, Dr. Webb's transmission flickered onto the central holographic display. They bought it, she declared to the assembled officials. Hook, line, and sinker. General Thompson, his weathered face illuminated by the blue glow of tactical readouts, leaned forward. Show me the exact wording again. A document materialized in the air, certain sections highlighted. The general squinted at subsection 12, paragraph 9, then laughed loudly, causing a nearby aide to spill his coffee. Those pompous invertebrates define military personnel as individuals trained in tactical warfare, weapon systems, and physical combat, he read aloud, shaking his head in disbelief. They specifically excluded administrative, financial, and support staff from the ban. Exactly, Dr. Webb's hologram replied. They were so fixated on our Marines and Special Forces that they completely overlooked the most dangerous humans of all. The room went quiet as Chief Administrator Rad Chen, a small, unassuming man with wire-rimmed glasses, stepped forward. As the head of the Terran Financial Operations Division, he was rarely involved in military briefings. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, adjusting his glasses with a precision that almost seemed surgical, "I believe this is where my department comes in." When Chen smiled, those who knew him well instinctively checked their bank accounts. "We're going to deploy our accountants." 3 hours later, Operation Balance Sheet was officially authorized. Chen sat in his office, carefully reviewing personnel files as though he were selecting elite commandos. Meera Patel, an expert in tax fraud across 17 planetary systems, had uncovered billions in misappropriated credits and forced 3 CFOs into witness protection. Chen swiped to the next file. "Do Radio Kono," he read aloud, "the definitive analysis of intergalactic currency manipulation. The Taurian exchange still crashes every time he publishes a paper." Another swipe. "Marcus Kim created a financial algorithm so intricate that when the Prolans tried to decode it, their central banking AI achieved sentience and immediately filed for retirement." Chen closed the files with a satisfied nod. He hadn't felt this alive since the great tax code rewrite of 20,187. As he walked out to brief his team, he muttered to himself, "They wanted us to disarm." Editor, what happens when humans weaponize spreadsheets? Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Ambassador Vic was puzzled by an unusual transmission asking for his government's complete financial records for routine Concordat inspection. The request was signed by something called the Intergalactic Financial Compliance Unit, and for some inexplicable reason, it filled him with an odd sense of existential dread. The recruitment center for Operation Balance Sheet resembled a high-end accounting firm, glass, steel, and the faint smell of premium coffee. The only difference was that the security scanners at the entrance were military-grade, and the potted plants concealed surveillance equipment capable of monitoring an entire moon. As Chen entered, 5 individuals were already seated at a conference table, each radiating a distinct brand of financial ferocity. "Ladies and gentlemen," Chen announced, Welcome to the front lines of humanity's most creative compliance with galactic law. Meera Patel looked up from her quantum tablet, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. 12:45, she had the laser focus of someone who found irregular cash flows more thrilling than people. "So we're clear," she said, not missing a keystroke. "You want us to weaponize accounting practices against alien civilizations." "Precisely," Chen replied, and for the first time in her career, Meera smiled during a briefing. Dr. Raijo Kono, his meticulously trimmed beard in place, stroked it thoughtfully. As a former head of 3 planetary reserve systems, he had a reputation for designing financial regulations so airtight that even theoretical physicists struggled to find loopholes. "Fascinating," he mused, his soft Nigerian accent rich with intrigue. "Most species view warfare as a physical endeavor. They've never experienced a true audit." Marcus Kim, the youngest of the group at 32, was projecting galactic market patterns onto the wall. His augmented reality glasses gave off a faint glow. Their entire economic model relies on stability and predictability. We can exploit that. "Absolutely can," agreed Jill, her silver-streaked hair pulled back into a severe bun. As a former director of forensic accounting for the Terran Revenue Service, she had recovered more from tax evaders than the GDP of several colonies combined. Every civilization has financial secrets. Find those, and you control the galaxy. The final member of the team remained silent, observing. Eduardo Vargas, a former university professor who had spent 30 years flying under the radar, had secretly created most of the financial algorithms that powered interstellar commerce. His skill in finding patterns in seemingly random data had made him both incredibly wealthy and deeply paranoid. Finally, Eduardo spoke, his voice surprisingly gentle for someone who had once caused the Proxima Stock Exchange to crash with a single research paper. "The question," he began, "is whether we're building something or tearing something down." Chen nodded with appreciation. "Both. We're dismantling their assumptions of control while building a new understanding of human capability." The training program began immediately. A facility that resembled a cross between a university library and a military boot camp became the home for the Spreadsheet Squad, where they honed their financial warfare skills. Meera perfected the art of spotting financial vulnerabilities in alien corporate structures, often identifying critical weaknesses within minutes of receiving reports that other analysts had spent months analyzing. A holographic spreadsheet had been cleverly hiding profits in dimensional storage accounts, a brilliant move. But they'd overlooked one crucial detail: relativistic tax depreciation. Concor, a specialist in crafting complex economic scenarios, had devised a strategy that could trigger cascading financial reactions, putting pressure on alien governments without a single shot being fired. "If we implement this regulatory suggestion," he explained to Chen one evening, "the Prolan currency will devalue by precisely 3.8% over 6 weeks, just enough to force them to negotiate, but not enough to cause significant hardship." Marcus had created predictive models of avian economic behaviors so precise that during simulations, the AI playing the role of alien financial ministers accused him of cheating. Meanwhile, Sen conducted mock audits of historical alien financial records, uncovering corruption that even the perpetrators had forgotten. Eduardo quietly built a system capable of tracking every credit across 17 different galactic banking systems, a concept he called perfect financial transparency, a concept more terrifying to most alien species than any human warship. He then presented each member of the team with their official credentials and a small, unassuming device resembling an old-fashioned calculator. "Your primary weapon," he said with a completely serious expression. "A quantum link, untraceable and capable of processing financial data faster than most planetary AIs." Eduardo turned the device over in his hands. "This could analyze the entire galactic banking transaction history in seconds?" "Precisely," Chen replied. "Now, who's ready to make some alien nations cry during tax season?" I have hands raised instantly, each holding a calculator with more computing power than most warships. The Prolin Trade Summit on Nexus Station was the galactic equivalent of a high-stakes poker game, where the chips were entire planetary economies. Representatives from 27 species gathered in the Grand Assembly Hall, each holding their data tablets, ceremonial status objects, and, in the case of this delegation, their emotional support funarm. Ambassador Victus was holding court near the refreshment synthesizers, surrounded by a circle of sycophantic minor officials. "The humans have gone completely silent in the region border dispute," he chittered smugly. "Without their military to back up their demands, they'd become irrelevant, practically overnight." High Chancellor Falbach's gelatinous form rippled with amusement. "I heard they're sending representatives to this summit, probably to beg for more favorable trade terms now that they're effectively neutered." The chamber doors slid open with a hiss, and 5 humans entered, each dressed in identical charcoal grey suits designed to be as forgettable as possible. They carried no visible weapons, only slim briefcases and those strange primitive calculating devices that humans seemed so attached to. "That's them," Admiral Zorks whispered to Vic. "They look like bureaucrats." "Worse," Vicus replied. "Accountants. The humans are so desperate, they've sent number crunchers to a strategic trade summit." The human delegation approached, led by a small man with wire-rimmed glasses who introduced himself as Rad Chen. The others were simply presented as financial specialists, their names slipping from alien memories as soon as they were spoken. "Welcome," boomed Zertal, the massive heptagon who served as the summit moderator. "Though I must say, humans, we expected your diplomatic corps or trade ministers. Have you fallen so far that you sent clerks to represent your interests?" The assembled delegates chittered, burbled, and vibrated in what passed for laughter across various species. The human accountants, however, remained impassive, though the one named Mera adjusted her glasses in a way that made Vic inexplicably nervous. "We're here to discuss the region trade corridor," Chen stated plainly. "Specifically, the new tariffs your coalition has imposed on human shipping since our military withdrawal." Gaytrell's 7 facial slits twisted into what passed for a smirk among his kind. "Yes, well, the Concordat has determined that non-military vessels require additional protection. The tariffs merely reflect this new reality." "I see," Chen replied, nodding to his colleagues. "Then perhaps we should review the numbers together." What followed was, on the surface, the most tedious presentation in the history of galactic diplomacy. Dr. Rono walked through spreadsheet after spreadsheet of trade flows, tariff structures, and market projections, while Mera annotated specific data points. most of the alien delegates began checking their communication devices or slipping into semi-dormant states. Admiral Zorks was about to excuse himself when he noticed something odd. Marcus Kim hadn't spoken a word, but his fingers were flying across his calculator, and with each calculation, new data appeared on the central projection. "What exactly are you demonstrating?" Zorks interrupted. Chen smiled thinly. "Just a comprehensive analysis of galactic trade, Admiral. For example, we've noticed that Prolan defense contractors have been routing payments through 17 different shell companies in the Zdth Nebula." The room fell silent. Zorks's eye ridges shot up so fast they nearly detached from his face. "What are you implying?" "More," continued Mera, highlighting a particularly complex flowchart. "These payments coincide perfectly with the disappearance of certain restricted technologies from concordant armories. Curious timing." "This is outrageous," Zorks sputtered. "You have no authority to investigate." "We're not investigating," Eduardo clarified gently. "We're merely analyzing publicly available data, the same data available to the Concordant Regulatory Commission, which I believe meets next week." Dean smoothly brought up another screen. "We've also prepared a report on the tax implications. By our calculations, the Prolan government owes approximately 42 billion credits in unpaid taxes. Billion credits in undeclared transaction fees, with penalties and interest, of course. High Chancellor Falvak's gelatinous form had gone completely still, a sign of extreme distress in his species. "Those records are confidential," he rumbled. "How did you—" "Public data," Chen corrected. "We're very good at connecting dots that others miss. For instance, the dots connecting your personal accounts to certain mining operations in Minxian territory. Operations that continued even after the liberation." The room erupted into chaos as delegates frantically consulted their own devices. Ambassador Vix found himself surrounded not by sycophants, but by furious representatives demanding to know if their own financial irregularities had been similarly exposed. Raised a hand, and somehow the gesture silenced the room more effectively than any shout could. "We propose an immediate return to the previous tariff structure," he stated calmly. "Return, these analyses remain proprietary working documents, rather than public filings with the appropriate regulatory bodies." "You're blackmailing us," Zekto rumbled, all 7 facial slits now narrowed to tight lines. Marcus Kim finally spoke, his eyes not leaving the glowing screen of his calculator. "No, we're negotiating. Blackmail would be illegal. We're simply offering a mutually beneficial arrangement based on financial transparency." He looked up, smiling thinly. "Unless you prefer full transparency." The new trade agreement was approved unanimously within the hour. As the human delegation packed up their briefcases, Admiral Zorks approached Chen. "Those weren't just calculations you were doing," he accused quietly. Chen agreed, not missing a beat. "No. They were weapons-grade audits, Admiral. And that was just a warning shot." For the first time since humans had joined the galactic community, an alien military officer looked at an unarmed human with the appropriate level of fear. News of the Prolan Trade Summit spread through galactic channels faster than a quantum entanglement breach. Most species dismissed it as a fluke, a single clever maneuver by desperate humans. but within the upper echelons of the Galactic Concordat, alarm bells were ringing louder than a Kronksian mating call during tax season. These humans are more dangerous without weapons. High Chancellor Felbach confided to his inner circle, his gelatinous form pulsating with anxiety. At least battleships can be tracked on sensors. His concerns proved prophetic when the SCR Dominion, a militant hive mind that controlled 12 resource systems along the Outer Rim, seized 3 human colony worlds, citing security concerns following the military withdrawal. The Dominion's supreme tactician, a particularly unpleasant specimen named Drail, broadcast his victory speech throughout settled space. The era of human expansion ends today. Without their warships, they can only watch as we appropriate their territories for the greater glory of the SCR. The Galactic Concord issued the diplomatic equivalent of a strongly worded letter and promptly scheduled 17 committee meetings to discuss possible responses over the next 6 standard months. Kane watched the broadcast from Terran Confederation headquarters, his face revealing nothing as he turned to his team. It seems the SCR have volunteered to be our first comprehensive case study. Mira looked up from her quantum tablet. Their financial structure is archaic, based on resource allocation rather than currency. It makes them harder to track. Not impossible, though, Eduardo noted quietly. They still trade with others. Every interaction leaves a trace, Chen agreed. Precisely, he continued. Dr. Auna, what do we know about SCR financing? Raj brought up a holographic display showing an intricate web of resource flows. They maintain the fiction of a self-sufficient empire, but they've been secretly funding operations through shell companies in neutral space. A very sophisticated laundering operation, entirely illegal under Concordat finance regulations. Added, her eyes gleaming with the joy of a predator spotting wounded prey, regulations they themselves voted to establish 50 cycles ago. Marcus was already running simulations. Their military expansion is funded primarily through mining operations. Those operations are leveraged to the tune of 46 billion credits against loans from the Galactic Central Bank. Means? Chen prompted, though he already knew the answer. Which means, Marcus continued, if those loans were to be suddenly called due to regulatory violations. The plan that emerged over the next 48 hours wasn't merely an audit. It was a full-scale financial assault. The spreadsheet squad deployed to 5 galaxy-wide locations simultaneously, armed with nothing more dangerous than their calculators and a thorough understanding of galactic regulatory frameworks. Eduardo traveled to the Galactic Central Bank headquarters, where he requested a meeting with the Chief Risk Officer, ostensibly to discuss human loan restructuring. Once inside, he casually mentioned certain irregularities in SCRB securities. Not an accusation, he clarified gently, sliding across a data crystal. Just some patterns we noticed. I'd hate for the bank to be blindsided if someone less discreet were to bring these to public attention. The risk officer's tentacles went pale as she reviewed the data. Within hours, the bank announced a routine review of all SCRB securities. Meanwhile, Dr. Angu presented himself at the Concordat Regulatory Commission with documentation so thorough it caused the commissioner to break out in stress pulses, a common reaction among hypogonids facing unexpected audits. These mining operations, Raj explained, pointing to specific entries, appear to be financing military assets through interest rate arbitrage across 6 different jurisdictions. This violates Statutes 7 to 42 of the Non-Proliferation Financial Protocols. On Nexus Station, Mira infiltrated the annual Insurance Underwriters Symposium, where she delivered a dry technical presentation on risk assessment in frontier territories. Buried within her mind-numbing slides was data suggesting that SCR military vessels were operating with fraudulent insurance certificates. Just an academic observation, she noted, as underwriters frantically checked their exposure. By evening, every SCR vessel's insurance coverage was under review. In focused on the tax implications, filing 17 different whistleblower reports with various regulatory bodies, each containing just enough information to trigger mandatory investigations, but not enough to resolve them quickly. The beauty, she explained to Chen during their encrypted check-in, is that each investigation requires the SCR to freeze assets during review. They'll have to choose between fueling their warships and keeping their economy running. The masterstroke came from Marcus, who identified a critical weakness in the SCR financial network. Their entire military budget flowed through a supposedly untraceable quantum encrypted channel that, as it happened, still used an authentication protocol humans had helped design decades earlier. Working through intermediaries, Marcus introduced a perfectly legal financial product into the galactic markets, a derivative instrument so complex that most analysts needed specialized AI just to understand its basic structure. What nobody realized was that this instrument's value moved in precise opposition to the encrypted military accounts, effectively creating a financial antimatter weapon. 3 days into what the human media cheerfully dubbed Operation Balance the Books, the SCR Dominion faced the perfect financial storm. Their military funding channels were frozen due to compliance investigations. Their insurance underwriters had suspended coverage, grounding their merchant fleet. The Galactic Central Bank had called in loans worth 4 times their annual GDP, and somehow, inexplicably, a new financial instrument had emerged that was rapidly devaluing their remaining liquid assets. Vril, the supreme tactician who had so confidently announced the seizure of human colonies, found himself unable to pay his troops, fuel his ships, or even maintain life support in his command centers. The morning of the 4th day, the SCR Dominion announced its immediate withdrawal from human territories and requested urgent financial restructuring assistance from, of all people, human consultants. "We never fired a shot," Chen remarked, watching the SCR evacuation ships depart the colonies. "Never violated a single regulation. We just adjusted their balance sheets." Turns out, Mira added with the closest thing to a smile her colleagues had ever seen, double-entry bookkeeping is more devastating than any weapon when properly applied. As human colonists reclaimed their worlds, a message rippled through diplomatic channels across the galaxy. Military forces might be prohibited, but humans had found another way to fight, and it was infinitely more terrifying. The fall of the SCR Dominion triggered what economic historians would later call the Great Reckoning. Much like a black hole distorts everything in its vicinity, the financial shockwave created by human accountants warped the entire galactic economic landscape. Stock markets crashed across 17 systems as investors frantically tried to determine if they were exposed to the same vulnerabilities as the SCR had been. The Galactic Exchange implemented trading halts 14 times in a single rotation. The Terran credit, previously considered the most stable currency in the quadrant, fluctuated so wildly that currency traders developed a new stress medical condition called human auditor syndrome. Ambassador Vic called an emergency session of the Concordat Security Council, his carapace now a sickly pale color from lack of sleep. "We have created a monster," he chittered, mandibles clicking in distress. "These humans have weaponized our own financial systems against us." "Technically," corrected a Minxian representative, "one of the few species still allied with humans. They've just enforced existing regulations very thoroughly." High Chancellor Falbach's gelatinous form rippled with agitation. 3 major trading houses have already collapsed because they couldn't meet the sudden demand for transparency. The Yukon Banking Consortium is questioning that. This narrative is a fascinating exploration of how humans, through their mastery of financial systems, rise to a position of immense power without relying on traditional military might. The story's central theme is the terrifying potential of financial transparency and the manipulation of economic systems, which humans leverage to disrupt galactic power dynamics. Their approach, analyzing financial systems to expose corruption and exploit loopholes, transforms them from a relatively small and previously underestimated force into a dominant power, effectively weaponizing financial audits and regulations. The narrative's central tension lies in the human's ability to impose a new system that prioritizes transparency, forcing other species and financial institutions to confront their own hidden transactions. As the human strategy unfolds, it becomes clear that their greatest strength is not military might, but rather their deep understanding of how to manipulate and enforce regulations, forcing everyone to comply or suffer the consequences. By the end, the humans have introduced a new galactic framework of financial transparency, with their auditors becoming more feared than any army. This shift from military conquest to economic manipulation forces the galaxy to adapt. The concept of weaponized transparency emerges, highlighting the efficiency and power of systems that are properly regulated and fully disclosed. The final message is that true power lies not in brute force, but in the ability to understand, control, and shape the systems that bind the galaxy together. The story is a sharp commentary on the influence of financial systems and transparency in modern society. Also serves as a reminder of how deeply interconnected power, knowledge, and information can be, how, by mastering those systems, individuals or groups can change the course of history without firing a single shot.